2, 3. I'm going to do my intro. Welcome to the 5th episode of the Next Project Conversations. Again, our goal right now is to really have insightful conversations with some of the brightest minds in the country dealing with the church, technology, and the future. Today, I am so excited. I have a guest that has been a friend for a long time. The Reverend Dr. I have to say Doctor twice because she's going for her second doctorate. Dr. Dominique A. Robinson. I believe she is a prophetic voice for the future because she was talking about iHomiletics and how to speak to people in different mediums 5, 10 years before we came to this moment where what she was talking about is absolutely needed. Right now, I just want to open the door, introduce her to you guys. Rev, how are you doing in Texas?
I am good, Pastor Smith. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share. And as you shared with everyone, a lifelong friend and big brother who literally was already on the cutting edge of innovation. And so my iHomiletic conversations with you 10 years ago, we're replaying it. Deja vu now.
It is deja vu. And I just want you to sort of talk. What's your current experience in the space right now at Wiley in your doctoral program? And I know you've been doing some stuff dean to dean with the Spelman Dean. You've done some other sharing. I want to hear what your experience in this current environment has been.
Wiley College actually was the first HBCU to make the call to close and to shut down. And I don't mean shut down in our operations, meaning to get our students off campus to a safe offsite campus. And it was both frightening and exciting at the same time because you're embarking on something new and a change. And so under the leadership of Dr. Herman Felton Jr., getting together with our faculty, our staff, and just putting all hands on deck to make sure our students got somewhere safely. And so here at Wiley College, we've kind of already been functioning that way. We got all of our students were able to get tablets and devices before they were able to get home. We trained all of our faculty and staff to be able to move everything to an online platform before everyone relocated and we got to this state shutdown type mode. So here at Wiley, it's been, we've been just moving along as best as we possibly can, but really becoming more of a family and helping each other out in every department and becoming completely accessible to our students. So my experience for campus ministry and leading religious life here at Wiley has been amazing. We were able to move Holy Week online with an event the day of Holy Week. The team just jumped in and got it moving. The thing that I feel like I've missed the most is that this was my first academic year serving in this capacity. So I feel like the students who felt like I got half of a semester of my academic journey here. And so there were some things that I, wish we were able to do differently, but I'm looking forward to continuing the work. And so campus ministry has been amazing. Our student interns have been engaged. We do Sunday inspiration online, Monday morning prayer, chapel Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday night Bible studies, Wednesday hump day prayer. We do a spiritual kickback every Friday for our students to hop on and just share whatever's on their mind. Last week, they wanted to talk about burning sage. And so, we're just meeting them at the point of their need every Wednesday. We did earlier today, we do a Wellness Wednesday in partnership with Dr. Ray Lundy, the Director of Student Health and Wellness, because I believe we are in a season where people, if they're honest, your religion is becoming your coping mechanism. And it's mental well-being. And so we want to make sure that we're offering the right type of partnership because we are in collective trauma. Even if you were the healthiest person mentally and emotionally, you are now finding areas of distress and anxiety. And so we were trying to offer the care, not just for our students, but for faculty and staff. So Wiley has been moving along. The PhD program, sweet Jesus, they have online as well. I have a paper due this week. I start Greek on Monday, and I have a good intensive, and it's all online. And so eventually, you got to take some time to unplug so that you don't get burned out or overwhelmed. And so those have been my two worlds. The third world that you know of has been able to serve kind of as a consultant for many of our AME Zion churches and other congregations that I've had partnerships with on how to convey, establish effective and impactful children, youth, and young adult ministries via digital formats. And so it's just been amazing to see how quickly the body of Christ and people have been able to move in that they were moving this all occurred. So it's just very interesting.
So a couple of things you said a lot there. So I'm going to piece it out. I want to do three things. First of all, you are doing more ministry on campus than most churches are. So I want you to talk about that cadence of how you're managing that, because I think the reality, you are living in a new reality where churches need to move away from the Sunday experience and really talk about how do we speak to people holistically. Number two, I want to push back a little bit. You talked about iHomiletics and getting people ready digitally for children and kids ministry. But the reality is, and I believe this, is that what you've been talking about is not anymore just a children and kids ministry. It is now for everybody from grandmama and them all the way down. I had a Zoom check-in with my church. You've been to my church, you know, Mother Martin, she's 105 years old. She was on the Zoom check-in. So I want you to really talk about those two elements, the digital element the digital element being the entire church, not just kids and youth, but also I want you to talk about what that cadence looks like. Because there's a lot of pastors, I think, that are doing a lot of talking to the screen, but not interacting. And a lot of what you're describing is interacting. And for everybody that's watching, if you have questions for Dr. Robinson, I need you just put them in the comments. We want to ask her as many questions because her expertise is so valuable right now. Go ahead.
Thank you. So let me share, based off of the research that I did for iHomiletic at the time, it was based off of surveying over 3,000 Black millennials, mostly on the East Coast and mostly part of the Black Methodist Church, where they were answering questions about their identity matrix and how they engage church. And of course, those same paradigms, methodologies, and findings now translate to any and everybody. And so I've seen that happen even here in higher education as well as the faith community. So I want to share a couple of core tenets with those of you who are watching that I think will help you as you develop your pattern, your cadence, and just ways to be effective in your ministry. So a couple of things. One, you want to have visibility. That you're trying to reach need to be able to see you, whatever that is. So create and make sure your digital footprint has been established and it's authentic and true to who and what you are: church, ministry, personal brand, higher education facility, right? So you want to have some visibility, and you want to do it on as many platforms as you can manage for your bandwidth. You don't want to overexert yourself. You want to have visibility on social media platforms, on your personal churches or your school's website. For those of us who are in higher education, you want to have visibility by way of email, text messaging, and calling, and as well as your course management platform. So you want to have visibility. That visibility then leads us to what is most important right now, particularly reaching people, is accessibility. If we see you, then we know exactly how we can access you. One of the things that has shifted for me in my professional world is that I was not following my students on social media, and I didn't always give them access to who I was via social media. But in the time that we live in now, accessibility is important. So if you need to inbox me by way of Facebook or send me something by way of Twitter, however that is, I need to be accessible. And I think that as we continue to develop ministry for Next, we need to be visible, we need to have accessibility, and we need to be open with that accessibility in creating means that we didn't always use before. And so it creates a sense of being uncomfortable, but it's necessary right now. So visibility, accessibility. The next thing is predictability. So we are in a quote unquote new normal or a transitional period. And so as you're offering ministry to people, predictability is important because that's a sense of normalcy. How often are you offering something and being clear about it? So as I was sharing my schedule here at Wiley College, people are very clear that every Sunday there'll be an inspiration message on the Wiley page. Every Monday morning at 7:30 is prayer. Every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. is Zoom Bible study. The link will go out at 5 p.m. Every Wednesday at 12:15, a prayer that was pre-recorded by a student leader is being sent out. And we know that throughout the week, we can make one-on-one appointments, virtual pastoral care appointments with Dr. Robinson. And then for the summer, it's every other Friday for the spiritual kickback. During the term, it was every Friday. So being consistent about the schedule and making sure people know when they can, connect with you. It's those entry points that are important. So visibility, accessibility, predictability, and in the space you create, there needs to be some vulnerability. By that, I don't mean that preachers say you're bleeding on the people. No. People need to be heard. So the space that you create has to be safe, brave, and sacred. And so we can't, as preachers, just preach to people. We have to give them space to voice themselves.
Exactly.
And so right now for Bible studies, being live or people being able to engage you is one of the best things we're seeing nowadays, because it's requiring what's important is a deep theological preparation for preachers and faith leaders. You can no longer offer sugarcoat candy sermons and lessons, because now people can engage you and ask the necessary questions. And if you are really prepared to do the teachings of Christ, you can come in with a prepared lesson. But when somebody asks a question, you need to deal with that in that moment and redirect it. But that means that requires, one, you reestablishing your spiritual life and getting in the word and studying and being prepared. No longer is it time for you just to offer something like insulin and people get a shot and they have to come back to you. No, because churches and ministries and church schools are now available everywhere. So if you're not given what's necessary, we can go somewhere else to get what's necessary. So in that creating vulnerability, that means that you have to allow people the space to communicate with you. Here's why I think there's something different here. Here's where iHomiletic has developed all of this, but jumping a little bit different with preaching and teaching. I do think teaching needs to be live and there needs to be some engagement. So whether it's a private Zoom or whether it's online, please make sure you're engaging the comments of people so that you can answer the questions that are needed. But for preaching, I personally believe that pre-recording the sermon, broadcasting it, and then being available for live comments while the sermon is broadcasting, it's what's important, again, for that space of vulnerability. Along with so visibility, accessibility, predictability, vulnerability, because people need the platform to be heard and to share so that they don't feel like they're in any of this by themselves. And that leads to a level of accountability, because now people can ask you directly or research what it is you're preaching or teaching about and add to the conversation. So there's now accountability about how much theological astuteness are we offering. And this is the time for those who are theologically trained to offer what it is that God has given them and to help their colleagues that might not have it. Because in this season, as we were sharing, people are asking the hard questions. And an easy answer is not getting them to where they need to go. So visibility, accessibility, predictability, vulnerability, accountability will lead to what we find to become the new community. Virtual community becoming the new community.
One of the things we've noticed at university over the past few weeks, and talking to all of our different small group opportunities, is there needs to be moments of community and teaching. Because people are going through trauma and they're also home alone. Or some people have, if they're students, have gone back to very negative situations. Not every home's a home.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what that part of the dynamic is? Because I think that's such a significant, it's not only answering questions, but it's allowing space for people to not bleed, but heal in that space. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I think that we, particularly the people of color, are people that there's something special about our corporate and communal lamenting. And the season that we're living in is preventing people from attending to the deaths of people and the grief and loss of things, because we all have lost something in this season, whether it's our normal routine, being able to just go outside when you want to, whether it's going to work. People have lost jobs. There are so many different things that are going on. And so I think that having that space, like you talked about, where people can share, allows for, one, kind of a communal lamenting and a communal healing and encouragement. Because here's the thing, preacher, you don't have to offer hope by yourself anymore. It's a part of the community. You do not have to be the authority of healing or scripture now that it's a community. And I dare say this, God forbid you partner with another pastor in church to bring your communities together for the sharing of the load throughout the month and the week. And that's what you've actually been seeing with Dean Nichelle Guidry and myself for Sundays. We're getting together. Listen, we don't have to develop the lessons all by ourselves. We can come together for the conversations and share the load and offer each other respite throughout the week as we prepare. Hey, my week is filled this week. So this week, Dean Guidry is on. She's doing most of the preparation for our conversation on Sunday because of what I shared, what I have this week. And we just continue that load sharing. And that's something that preachers and pastors have to get to a place of, this is a season of collaboration, not competition, not better or less than, offering the grace. There's no perfection in this season. Let's just do it together. We have to get back to the very founding and birthing of this church, of putting our resources together to make sure no one lacks. And that's where we need to get to, back to a place of humanity and love and community and tribal ancestral modes that help us just, be at a place of health and well-being.
Thank you so much for that. I think your point on community and coming together and partnership, because we have to create so much content. If anybody just tries to create all the content themselves, they will burn themselves out. Even as I was planning my own content, I was like, I know some really brilliant people. Having conversations with them changes my content preparation. I just ask questions. I don't have to figure it out. Sister Amy Larimore, did I say it right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This is a great question, because all of us are not designed for social media and extroversion of it. So can you really help us with this question? Because I think this is such a critical question for those of us not designed and built with that extroverted streak.
You want to read the question for everybody? I guess everybody sees it. Sorry. So Amy Larimore is a wonderful support and plays a significant role in my PhD program for Christian Theological Seminary. And so when she says as a fellow introvert, it's because she knows, and Pastor Smith, you know this, I am an introvert to the umpteenth power. One of the things that I have to admit, when you ask how I was doing, personally, I actually have been doing really well, because this whole social distancing has given me great permission to just kind of stay to myself and not have to go out. I was the person that would flake on events. And so, this has been helpful for me. So as a fellow introvert, how do you recommend navigating your public persona and your authentic self? That is a very sacred dance that I do every day, because as I shared with you all, the schedule that I have going on IG Live and preparing for conversations has required me to push beyond my personal kind of limit and limitation, even spiritually. Right now, we're in a season leading up to Pentecost. I would have been fasting from social media, but I cannot refrain from social media because of my career and my ministry. However, I do have to put limitations on how much I engage. So my recommendation would be to take a look at your week and schedule things out and intentionally plan Sabbath every day, and if needed, multiple times a day, around how much you're engaging people and things. And being honest about where you are. You have to be very honest with yourself about your emotional state of being, your spiritual state of being. It's a pendulum, and it shifts throughout the day. And so it's, can I take this on right now? And if I can't, I should be honest and with myself, and then even with people I'm engaging. So maybe my energy will be low or will be different. And so I take a look at my week. I'm very clear that for my Sunday messages, I record them during the week, so I don't have to get up and do it during the week. I mean, on the weekend. Dean Guidry and I chose a time that allows us to sleep in if necessary and regroup if necessary, so that when we do our IG lives then. And so my recommendations will be, one, get in tune with your energies and your spirit. Also, put things in place that prevent you from even going to a low place. Know what helps you. So what spiritual practices and disciplines do you need to put in place? Is it prayer? Is it meditation? Is it mindfulness? Is it being physically active? Do you need to be careful of how much you're drinking? Do you need to be mindful of what type of foods you're taking in? For me, I love music. Music helps shift my mood all the time. And so, and I like different types of music, but I am an old soul at times. I love good old gospel. So sometimes I'll just get up and say, Alexa, play James Cleveland. And just throughout the day, moving around, hearing something helps boost my mood. I'm also a person who loves aromatherapy, so I light candles all day. As a matter of fact, that's one of the costs of my life during the pandemic that has gone up. I burn candles all day. So I had to purchase more candles. I purchased a diffuser so I could use the oils to kind of help navigate. And I am the person who has a candle in the bedroom, a candle in the living room, a candle in the kitchen, a candle in the bedroom. And so, yeah, that cost of living has gone up for me during the pandemic. But my recommendations are also to make sure you stay connected. We're being required to do physical distancing, and it doesn't mean you have to do social distancing. So who do you need to talk to make you laugh? Who do you need to talk to stay encouraged? And so be mindful of that. Use screen time or whatever is called on Android devices. I'm an Apple person, so use screen time to limit yourself. I can only do social media 2 hours a day. I'm going to turn off the alerts on CNN. I have my phone does downtime at 10:30. By 10:30, all the apps are shut down and it goes on do not disturb. That's my personal phone. For the students who are listening, my work phone stays on so I can hear you and access you. But I still do put limitations on that. When I know I'm unavailable, I call the clinical psychologist, tell her that I need to take some downtime so that if anybody calls, they know the recommendation is to call her for assistance. And she'll tell me if somebody's on fire at that point, you know? So I think it's about setting boundaries and being respectful of those boundaries. And for those who are living with other persons, communicating those boundaries, because you have to communicate those boundaries when you're living with people. And maybe it's just not the day for you. It's your husband, your spouse, your children. Snapping on them isn't going to help, because at this point, anxieties are high for everybody. So being able to articulate that. Here is the season to get to know yourself better and get to know, I got to put the spiritual lens on it, get to know God better. Those of us who have been actively engaged as faith leaders, sometimes we got to the place where we only open the Bible when we had to preach. What happens now when you have to fill your spiritual tank so that you can just survive without even having to share? And so acquaint yourself with spiritual practices that got you to a place where you love God. Go back to that question. How did I feel when I first got saved? What did I do when I first got saved that kept me on fire? And find those ways to connect and put those boundaries. But hear me, when you find yourself in a low place or you find yourself in a negative place where you're not connecting with anybody, share that with somebody. You need to be accountable to somebody, because we're living in a season where people are dying, and not hearing from you can cause alert. So you want to be mindful of that.
You know, one of the tragic things we heard on the news this week was the doctor in New York that was leading an emergency room, but then committed suicide, helping others, but not taking care of themselves. And I want to encourage every pastor be able to answer the questions Reverend Robinson talked about. What am I doing to spiritually refill myself? Who am I connecting with? What is my downtime? And, you know, you love aromatherapies. I love Legos, right? So I built Yoda right there. Yoda.
Yeah.
Yoda. I got another one next week. Will be there. But we need to have spaces and moments to take care of ourselves, because you cannot pour into people if you don't have. And this is a thing. We no longer have a pulpit, a choir, and ritual to hide behind.
Yeah. And you know what else we can't hide behind?
What?
Vanity. These are our natural naps. This is our hairline. This is our beard. These are our nails. Listen, that right there has been the whole struggle, right? That's been the whole struggle. You got to go back to learn how to do your own hair, your own nails, your everything, because now you're on IG Live. Everybody can see if your wig is twisted. So you got to pay attention. So figure out the way that helps you. And sometimes know that the practice doesn't even always have to be spiritual, right? It doesn't have to seem so spiritual. For me, I shared this during the IG Live with the Gidry a week or 2 weeks ago. One of my spiritual practices that I go right to when I'm not feeling is cleaning. It sounds odd, but when I start cleaning,
that's good stuff.
I feel like I'm being productive. I've achieved something, and it has improved my environmental wellness. So that helps me to kind of reset. So just figure out whatever that spirit, if it's coloring, if it's writing a letter, whatever it is, figure, like you said, Kamika Graves does puzzles. And the Reverend Dr. Teresa Fry Brown and my best friend, Veronica Perry, talked about ordering like a 2,000 piece puzzle. And I was like, where y'all putting that? That would bother me because it seemed like it would take up space, but it's something that they enjoy doing. And so you got to start figuring out, you know, it's, as we talked a little bit about children and youth ministry, one of the things that we all have to get back to doing is playing, having fun, laughing again. So if it's for me, I got Super Mario Nintendo on the screen. I have Atari. You know, I go way back.
Go way back.
Way back.
I'm still trying to find a Switch.
Yes.
So here, you know, we're almost to the end of our time, but I want to talk a little bit about where do you see this going? I'm going to shout some people out that I see doing some amazing stuff. And you're into kids ministry, so I'm going to focus on some of that. I love like some of like what the Fishers, Brandon and Victoria are doing up in Sacramento. Like they do this Friday thing with kids that's only half an hour. And last week they had the graphic on the screen, and I'm watching it like I'm interested, and I'm 43. It was a great thing. I've seen some other people do, like I like what Mark Thomas and the guys in the DC area talking about nothing. That's a really interesting thing. So we're seeing church people do these different formatted things. Even you know what? I'm going to pick on somebody that we usually never talk about when we talk about technology. Malcolm Bird, the way he's he might get me for this. He might get me, but I love how he took Mother Zion and makes it these conversations in a church that's highly ritualized.
Yeah.
And it's so authentically him. It's so authentically the Mother Church. It's so relevant for the period. I don't know how he does this synthesis of all these different elements, but somehow naturally out of his person, he's really created this. And the other two examples, they've created these great synthesis. Where do you see us going with these kind of synthesis moments in the next 3 to 4 to 5 years?
Yeah. So one, I think that faith leaders, particularly the leaders who are at the top of hierarchical church organizations, have to start to reimagine our policies, procedure, polity, and doctrine, so that we can start putting it in practice that's relevant for the day. I think we have to go back to remembering that we're not supposed to be dogmatic, and we have to remain relevant. And we've got to go back to the example of Jesus Christ, because at the end of the day, every denomination has been man-made. And so I'm not going to argue with you about your doctrine and your practice of your denomination, but I'm going to Jesus Christ. He used parables, which means he used the language of the day to articulate what was necessary. And the scripture says we have to be all things to all people so that we can edify the body of Christ, right? And so I challenge us to reimagine in how we're doing this, instead of trying to keep these man-made hierarchies and politics of respectability in place. So I'm gonna say that, and I may get in trouble for that. And that's cool, because I work at Wiley College. So listen, and so so I think that's something that we have to be mindful of. But where are we going? If we're honest with ourselves, we don't know if students will be able to return back to campuses in the fall. Right? So that means then we have to start reevaluating, what does higher education look like going completely online, and where there's no longer a non-traditional student, everybody is non-traditional. And now religiosity and well-being have to become priorities offered online before you expect anybody to achieve or succeed academically. So those are things we have to look at. And then for the church world, we have to start putting mental health at the forefront of what we're doing for everybody who is engaging and participating. And so where do I see us? I see us in the future, looking like the Jetsons, right? Everything remaining online, engaging with people. But if we are not careful, there will be a burnout and everything flatline. And so I'm praying that as we continue to move to the new paradigm, we truly start to practice Sabbath and rest and unplugging and collaboration and sharing and agape love in these new ways, because we're being forced to do so. And so I see us, I personally do not see us gathering again in large groups in 2020. I just don't see that for the rest of this year. I'm no prophet, at least not today. I mean, I used to be a prophet when I was a kid, when I was holding this. But anyway,
but you called iHomiletics from 5 years. So if you doing better than all the prophets that were saying 2020 was the year in January.
Woo, this is a year of clarity and vision. Okay, we see you. We
hear you now. I want to go back to the archives and start watching some of these New Year sermons.
Yes.
That would be a great study for one of your doctoral friends, talking about what is prophetic and what is foolishness.
I'll tell them. I'll send that to Dr. Frank Thomas.
One of the things, I just sat down with my boards, and we have determined that the earliest we are going to walk into our sanctuary to do anything is September.
Yeah.
And we are not a 5,000 member church. We see anywhere from 80 to 120 on a Sunday. So we are just a little larger than your average church in America. And I agree with you that the reality is that churches need to start thinking, what does it look long term, not to have the tent pole of Sunday. Right.
We have to stop calling this a Band-Aid. We have to start, instead of just doing whatever we need to do to get by, we need to start saying, what happens if this, not even what happens, this is going to be the new way of handling ministry. I think overall people will miss presence, right? So they'll miss the ministry of presence. They'll miss pastoral care in that way, but everything else could and should actually can function online. So for myself, this is the last week of the semester, the spring semester. I'm actually using next week to take a respite and unplug and then start programming again for the summer. But one of the things I'm already thinking about is how to create a digital chapel worship experience in case we don't come back in the fall. And so I'm in conversation with our director of music to see how we can get our choir to pre-record things. Our faculty and staff persons will pre-record scriptures. I will pre-record sermons, and then we'll put that together and allow that to be available on our YouTube channel so that persons can tap into our chapel experiences weekly. But we got to start figuring out ways where we can sustain this without fear.
Okay. We're going to go into overtime because usually I try to keep this half an hour, but you're too good. So we're going to go into overtime. Don't tell the other guests. We're just going to keep going. One of the things that we found at university is we've been doing Zoom Bible studies for 2 years now.
Yeah.
So we've got to, we know some things that other people don't know yet. That 8 weeks is the point of fatigue for people for Zoom.
Say that again for the people in the back.
8 weeks is a point of fatigue for Zoom.
And do you know how important that is as we are developing classes online? We need to be very clear that if 8 weeks is the point of exhaustion for adults, at least, then the point of exhaustion probably is a little shorter for those of us who are engaging academically, trying to keep people engaged and teaching them. And we have to be mindful too, as we do an online learning, that we might just need to be able to make the material available for students to plug in when necessary, instead of demanding them to engage live throughout the week. Because many of our students have had to go back and get jobs to help out at home. And so it's the season of becoming super sensitive to the marginalized and the unseen.
And this is the other thing. I have a question for you. Well, so we are actually at the point. Hold on. This is a good question. We've been home 6 weeks. So y'all got 2 weeks to start figuring out what's next. The reality is what are we doing as churches to make sure the programming, and I need you to give us some suggestion. A lot of churches are creating programming on old paradigms, on preferences of pastors and tech directors. How do we start polling and asking, and in what formats do we start asking congregants how they're receiving this? Because right now, everything that's going out is all a big echo chamber. It's either church people, church pundits, church commentators talking about how we're going into this new paradigm. But how do we ask the people how they're receiving it?
Yeah, so I think that's part of the system, what we have to do, right? We brainstorm, we prepare, we execute. We have to stop to assess before we continue to keep going. And that wasn't necessarily the practice of preaching in the Black church. We sat in the back door, greeted you, and people said good word, but we didn't really ask if it met your need theologically. And so that is a practice of higher education institutions to do an assessment and to be able to take that feedback and be honest about what it is that we're doing and how we're planning. But I do think I saw where Ms. Fisher asked, like, what week are we in? This is the time to start developing the assessment. So Reverend Vaja Parker has been doing work at Metropolitan Amy Zion Church in Jersey City, and she's been doing assessment the entire time. Her and Crystal Bailey out in Detroit, they've been assessing the entire time they've been doing it. Is this meeting a need? Are you able to access it? Is it on time? And just last week when I was finishing up Bible study with my students, I said, well, we're going to take a break for a week and then we'll reconvene in May. What do you all want to learn about? And they said they wanted to study the book of Revelation. I would have continued to study moving to Pentecost, but because this is what they said they wanted to study, that's where we are. And I see you, Amy, you're right. It feels like 8 weeks to me. I feel like March 13th marked when I got back to Marshall from my PhD intensive, and we were on shutdown since then. So I already feel like I've been at 8 weeks, but so people have been finding joy and saying, oh, it's the end of the semester, take a rest. But I think that, again, like you were saying, the assessment is important. Give yourself time to ask the questions. What do you want to learn about? What do you want to teach? I saw where Pastor Reginald Sharp put up, if you can ask a preacher any question at this time, what question would it be? And so it's the way we're getting that feedback. So ask the question, send out a text message, and be clear. So let me go back to our homiletic form. I want everybody, wherever you are, you can do it, Pastor Coloma. I want you to draw the lowercase letter I in the air. Just go ahead, draw it, right? You draw a lowercase letter I, lowercase letter I.
Mm-hmm.
Most people draw the stem and then the dot.
Mm-hmm.
I argue for I homiletic, you need to start at the dot, make it so impactful that I choose to be the stem and follow you, and you have to do it several times. That's important for the way, like you said, how are we shaping and assessing? At this point, your worship services shouldn't be 2 hours.
What's the length your research?
Services need to be 30 to 45 minutes. And quite honestly, because of the way we're living in, you need to start actually marketing what it is you're preaching while we're leading up to it, so that we have a point to engage you and market it, get there, give us the point, and give us one stem. You don't even have to make 3 points of your sermon on Sundays anymore. Give us one whole point, because we're going to be here for a while. So we'll go ahead and create a series or pick it up in Bible study. And you have your young adults that are back home. Engage them. Ask them to help you with your marketing. Ask them to help you with sharing. Ask them to help you engage, because we got to find entry points for people. And so, again, as you were saying, this 8-week point of assessing, it's time to assess. First off, am I still able to keep doing this? Can I keep doing this? Do I have the bandwidth to keep doing this? If not, who's on my team? And who do I need to get on my team to make sure the ministry keeps happening? So the assessment is not just about what am I preaching? What am I teaching? What do the people want? But am I capable of doing this at this time?
Can I ask one question for you? I want to take a step back, because we're talking very like 10 and 20 and 30,000 feet. You've done 3,000 surveys, so you know the questions to ask. Can you please tell the people some questions to ask for evaluation? Because there are people out there that don't have any idea what an evaluation question is.
Okay. So, for example, about maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago, I sent a message to a couple of parents of children. I wanted to know what people in elementary school were wondering. I said, can you ask them, what do they want to know about God?
Mm-hmm.
Based off of that question, it helped me to help churches to develop curriculum for teaching young people at this point. And you all need to know that the younger persons are asking questions. My cousin, Dr. Rakisha Fry-Brown, who works at Hampton University, her son, Mark Jr., literally said to me, is God a boy or a girl? All I'm saying is your assessment questions do not have to be profound and paragraphs. It's literally, what do you need to hear from God? What do you know about God? What are you struggling with most? What brings you joy the most? These are simple questions that can help you start shaping ministries and programming to help meet the needs of people. What do you need most? What brings you the most joy? What do you want to know about most? What book changed your life? What are you binge watching? Like, these are just some simple questions to ask people, so you know how to connect with them where they are and develop programming. And then ask the question, would you like to help?
Here goes a question for you. The Black church is built very much about the revelation of God's word to the pastor.
Yes.
You're doing a doctorate on homiletics, so you understand that God gives us and we figure it out, we talk.
Yeah.
But this versus the order. How do you want to speak to pastor ego? And I'm asking the difficult questions, but we're going into a new paradigm where people need a different thing, and ego could block us from missing what we need to say to people. So I think, for some people, they're hearing us talk about feedback and getting information and being led by congregational or other inputs. And I need you to help them process that in a healthy way.
I think that if we can remember that preaching and teaching is dialogical, that it then requires conversation with multiple partners. So yes, the preacher and God, but also and the people. We have to remember, as preachers, we exegete our context, which then requires us to have a conversation with people about what it is they need. And for me, I'm just, I grew up holiness. So I need to say it the way I think my grandmother would say it. For us to think that we know everything is practicing idolatry. We are the creations. To think that we know everything that the Creator has designed to be a need is arrogant. And so I hope this season is a season of humility for faith leaders to recognize that they cannot do it by themselves. They do not know it all. It does require study. But again, this dialogue of worship is a dialogue. When we sing music and how we respond, the call and response is not always verbal. Sometimes it's it's a silent call and response. And so you're preaching, even when you're doing it in a quote unquote room with nobody, there's a call and response happening digitally. I argued in my research with the iHomiletic, we used to see people with their heads down and get despondent. The truth is, the call and response, the frenzy changed from people actually screaming amen and shouting to people holding up tablets and phones to capture the frenzy and reshare it. And so I think that if we start to reimagine what the dialogue looks like between us and God, and remember that God don't only speak to you.
Mm-hmm.
God speaks to everyone. And so we have to remember that conversation. It's a dialogue. So pushing on the ego of a preacher is to remember that you are in a conversation with God about God's people. So you ought to include God's people.
Well, I want to close out with this one thing. One of the things that I've been personally working on with my preaching is shifting into the response being moderated in the commentary and understanding. I record mine live. I've tried both ways, and I feel like there's an organic nature for me with the live recording that works. But I see both, but I'm not getting any feedback. I just don't know why. I hate to say it, don't beat me up, Rev. I'm a little attached to Sunday mornings. I don't feel right this Sunday morning, but that's my personal preference. But like, I will do things in my sermons, like say amen, type amen. What's going on? How do you feel about this? Can you start giving us tips on how we can get people in the dialogue and get them to start responding? Because I've always loved how you were able to bring people into your sermons. So if you could give us some tips so as we go out on this.
Sure. I believe that, as I talked about the lowercase I and the dot, I think that dot really is our hashtag. It's the trending subject matter. It's the topic of our sermon. I think as we're preaching, we offer the subject matter. We offer the hashtag. We invite people to share the points again in the comments. And then for the church language, it's no longer tap your neighbor. It's turn your volume up. Tap the pillow on the couch or pull the sheet back on the bed, something of that nature. Is one of those things. Those are the things that people can say for that. But I think that we have to focus on our sermon form and execution. And so we need to focus on, what are we telling people they need to follow? Well, people need to be able to identify my theological claim, the subject matter I'm addressing, and the biblical text immediately. And so once I give them that hashtag and I invite people, then when you share in the comments, please use the hashtag. Here's the real challenge for the preacher. Go back and follow up. Respond to the questions. That right there, if you don't have time to do assessments, which I don't know how you don't, but let's say you don't have time to do assessments in this season, inviting people to comment and use the hashtag so that you can go back and follow up with persons becomes your assessment.
Wow. Well, you and I could talk all day. We probably have already. But I want to thank you so much. We're going to have to bring you back because, like I said, these are just conversations. These are not solutions.
Yeah.
Like you said in this moment, this is all about us being humble and examining it. So I figured the next project conversations will be going on at least for the next 6 months. And they will evolve, because right now we're just in assessing in early phases. We're at the very beginning of it. So I'm so grateful to have you on this. Thank you so much, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody, thank you so much for watching today. Join us tomorrow for episode 6. We got a very, 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 very special guest. It'll be 3 a.m. his time in Singapore. But I wanted to bring one of the brightest minds out there in digital innovation from Singapore. He want to share internationally how people view COVID. Sometimes I think we get caught in an American story. So it's great to hear from a believer in a foreign land, and also hear somebody that is watching the digital pulse of all these different technologies, talk about what that looks like. So if you meet us tomorrow, 12 p.m. for my special guest, Sang Shin from Singapore. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye.